They sent a legend to face a ghost. They said the canyon was haunted by a ghost. Guns and bounties were useless against it. So, they sent a legend to face a ghost. They said a phantom haunted the canyon, a ghost that rode the wind and commanded the storms. They offered a bounty for its head, a prize for any man brave or foolish enough to face it. But a legendary cowboy and his giant stallion came not to hunt a ghost. They came to listen to its story. The town of Red Gulch was dying. It clung to the edge of Crimson Canyon, like a dying man clinging to a cliff's edge. The silver vein that had given it life was running thin, and a new, mysterious threat was choking off its last breath of hope. Herds of pack mules, their lifeline to the outside world, were vanishing. Prospectors were being chased from the cliffsides by sudden rockfalls. A dark legend, once whispered around campfires, was now spoken of as a terrible, ruinous truth. They called it the Ghost Stallion. Inside the town's only saloon, the air was thick with cheap whiskey and quiet desperation. Cole Younger sat at a corner table, nursing a cup of coffee, listening. Redemption stood outside, a patient, dark mountain that drew curious, wary glances from the townsfolk. The talk was all of the horse. They didn't speak of it as an animal. They spoke of it as a spirit, a vengeful phantom. They said it was unnaturally intelligent, that it knew the canyon's every secret. It didn't just run. It planned. It set traps. It used the very landscape as a weapon. A large, barrel-chested man with a thick gray beard and the weary eyes of a leader slammed his fist on the bar. This was Jedediah Kane, the mine foreman, a man holding the weight of the entire town on his shoulders. Another 2 mules lost last night, led right off the narrow path down to the river. That's the 3rd time this month. That devil knows what it's doing. It's trying to starve us out. It was then that Kane's eyes fell on Cole. The legend of the man who tamed regret had traveled far. He saw not a simple cowboy, but a potential solution. He strode over to Cole's table, a bounty poster clutched in his hand. Jedediah Kane, you're younger, right? I've heard the stories. We've got a problem your particular set of skills might be suited for. A horse problem. He slapped the poster down on the table. It was a crude drawing of a wild black horse, its eyes filled with a demonic fire. A handsome sum was scrawled beneath it. Tell me about it. Kane told him everything. The lost livestock, the rock falls, the sightings of a black phantom that moved like smoke in the twilight. He spoke of it as a curse, a monster that had to be destroyed for the town to survive. Jedediah Kane, the bounty is yours if you can bring it down. A posse of my best men is riding out at dawn. You're welcome to join them. We'll corner it and end this. But Cole wasn't listening like a hunter. He was listening like a detective. He heard the fear in Kane's voice, but he also heard a story with missing pieces. He asked the one question no one else had bothered to ask. This mine has been here for 20 years. Why now? Has this ghost always been a problem? Kane was taken aback. He admitted that the stallion had been a legend for years, a solitary, elusive king of the canyon. But it had never been a menace. It had always kept its distance. The attacks, the aggression, it had all started about 6 months ago. The same time the mining company, in a desperate push for more silver, had started blasting a new shaft deep into the heart of the Western Ridge. I'm not interested in your money, and I won't ride with your posse. What? The great Cole Younger is afraid of a ghost. Number. But I've learned that when an animal that has been peaceful for years suddenly declares war, it usually has a damn good reason. Sending a posse in with guns blazing is how you get men killed. I'll go alone. A stunned silence filled the room. Kane stared at him, unable to comprehend a man who would turn down a fortune and walk willingly into the monster's lair alone. Cole walked out of the saloon, leaving the bounty poster and a room full of baffled men behind him. As the twin doors swung shut, he stood beside Redemption, looking out at the vast, blood-red maw of the canyon. He wasn't preparing to hunt a monster. He was preparing to seek an audience with a king. In the heart of his kingdom, to hunt a ghost, you cannot use bullets. You must learn its language. As the posse of miners rode out with rifles and bravado, Cole Younger and Redemption took a different path. They descended into the Crimson Canyon, not as conquerors, but as pilgrims entering a sacred, hostile land. The canyon was a kingdom of stone and silence, a maze of towering red walls carved by time itself. For 2 days, Cole did not seek out the Ghost Stallion. He simply existed within its domain. He made a small, smokeless camp. He moved slowly, deliberately, his every action a gesture of respect, not aggression. He was not a threat. He was a guest, waiting for an audience with the king. Redemption, tethered loosely, was his silent ambassador, a picture of immense power held in perfect, peaceful reserve. But they were being watched. Cole could feel it. A prickling on the back of his neck, the sense of unseen eyes following his every move. Sometimes, high on a distant ridge, he would catch a flicker of movement, a silhouette against the setting sun that would vanish before he could get a clear look. The ghost was testing him, observing him, measuring his intent. The stallion's intelligence was undeniable. Cole found the evidence everywhere. He saw the tracks of the lost mules, and he saw how they were not chased randomly, but expertly herded towards dead-end paths and treacherous slopes. He found a massive pile of rocks perched precariously above a narrow game trail, held in place by a single, carefully chosen keystone. It was a natural-looking deadfall trap, waiting for a careless traveler. This was not the work of a mindless beast. This was the work of a general defending his territory. On the third morning, Cole found what he was looking for. Not the horse, but its reason. He followed a barely there trail deep into the western ridge, the same area the miners had begun to blast. The air grew thick with the acrid smell of sulfur and stale water. There, hidden in a small, shaded basin, was a spring, or what was left of it. A thick, oily sludge, runoff from the new mine shaft above, was seeping into the once clear water, poisoning it. It was the only major water source on this side of the canyon. This is it. This isn't just his home. This is his lifeblood. They're not just digging for silver. They're poisoning his well. This wasn't a story of a monster. It was a story of a king fighting a desperate, silent war to save his kingdom from a slow, creeping death. The lost mules, the rock falls, they weren't acts of malice. They were tactical maneuvers, designed to scare away the invaders who were destroying his home. As if his discovery had summoned the king, a sharp, piercing whinny echoed from the cliffs above. Cole looked up. There, standing on a high precipice, silhouetted against the stormy sky, was the Ghost Stallion. He was leaner than Redemption, his body a roadmap of scars from a life of survival, but he stood with an untamable, defiant majesty. His eyes were not demonic. They were intelligent, and they burned with a righteous fury. He was not hiding anymore. He had seen Cole discover his secret. The time for observation was over. The Ghost Stallion pawed the stone ground, a clear challenge. He was giving Cole a choice. Leave his kingdom now, or face the consequences. Cole stood his ground, meeting the wild king's gaze. The slow burn was over. The confrontation was about to begin. A lesser man would have reached for a rifle. A posse would have seen a cornered animal, a perfect target. But Cole Younger saw a king defending his home. He knew that violence would only be met with violence. He had to find a different language, a language older than words, older than anger. The language of respect. Slowly, deliberately, Cole unslung the canteens from his saddle. He walked to the edge of the poisoned spring, dipped a finger in the oily water, and showed it to Redemption, who snorted in disgust. Then, Cole began to pour his own fresh, clean water onto the dry, cracked earth, far from the contamination. He emptied one canteen, then another. It was a small amount, a pitiful offering against the great thirst of the canyon. But its meaning was immense. He was not there to take, he was there to give. High above, the Ghost Stallion watched this strange ritual. His aggressive posturing softened, replaced by a tense, focused curiosity. He had only ever known the men in this canyon to take the silver, to take the land, and now to take the water. This quiet act of giving was something new, something that did not fit the narrative of war he had come to expect. But the true ambassador was not Cole. It was Redemption. Cole unlooped the lead rope from Redemption's halter, setting the giant stallion completely free. He gave his horse a quiet look, a silent communication between two souls who had long since transcended the need for words. Redemption understood. With a quiet dignity, the legendary stallion began to walk. He moved away from Cole, away from the camp, and towards the base of the massive cliff where the Ghost Stallion stood guard. He was not approaching as a challenger. His head was lowered slightly, his gait calm and steady. He was approaching as an equal, a diplomat from one kingdom to another. He stopped at the base of the cliff, 100 yards from the Wild King, and simply stood, a silent testament to the peaceful intentions of his human companion. For a long, breathless minute, the canyon was still. Two kings, one born of the wild, the other a legend of the world of men, locked in a silent, profound negotiation. Then, the turning point came. The Ghost Stallion, who had held his high ground with such defiant pride, did something no one in Red Gulch would have believed possible. He broke his gaze with Redemption, turned, and vanished from the cliff's edge. Cole felt a pang of disappointment, thinking his gesture had been rejected. But a moment later, a cascade of small rocks tumbled down a nearby game trail. And there, descending from the high cliffs with an astonishing grace and confidence, was the Ghost Stallion. He was not running. He was not charging. He was walking down to their level. He had accepted the invitation to parley. He stopped a safe distance away, his intelligent eyes flicking between the puddle of clean water, the calm giant that was Redemption, and the lone, quiet man. He did not drink. He did not approach. But by coming down from his fortress, he had made the first crucial concession. He had acknowledged that Cole was not just another invader. This was not going to be a war. It was going to be a treaty negotiation. The first fragile bridge of trust had been built, not with ropes or with force, but with a canteen of clean water and the silent, noble diplomacy of a legendary horse. The fragile piece of the parley was shattered by the sound of human impatience, the sound of greed. High on the western ridge, Jedediah Kane's posse had grown tired of waiting. Ignoring Cole's warning, they had decided to take matters into their own hands. They weren't hunting the horse anymore. They were trying to smoke it out, using dynamite to collapse the smaller caves and crevices where they believed the stallion might be hiding. The Ghost Stallion reacted instantly. The tentative trust vanished, replaced by a panicked, furious rage. He reared up, letting out a sharp, piercing scream, not a challenge, but a warning. He wasn't looking at Cole anymore. He was staring at the distant ridge, his body trembling, his ears swiveling frantically. He knew what that sound meant. Cole felt a cold dread wash over him. This was exactly what he had feared. The posse's reckless blasting wasn't just a foolish tactic. It was an act of profound ignorance. They didn't understand the delicate balance of this ancient canyon. But as another, louder boom echoed, followed by a deep, groaning rumble from within the earth, Cole realized the terrifying truth. The plot of this story was far darker than a simple poisoned spring. He looked at the Ghost Stallion, and for the first time, he saw past the anger and saw pure, instinctual terror. He had seen this look before in horses just moments before an earthquake, in cattle before a flash flood. The stallion could sense something the men couldn't, a deep instability in the very rock beneath their feet. The twist was not that the horse was intelligent. It was that he was a living barometer for the mountain itself. He wasn't just defending his water. He was trying to escape a death trap. The miners, in their desperate, reckless blasting, hadn't just cracked open a new vein of silver. They had fractured the ancient, unstable foundations of the entire western ridge. The Ghost Stallion's increasingly erratic behavior over the past 6 months wasn't a declaration of war. It was a desperate, panicked attempt to drive everyone, man and animal alike, out of a kill zone before the whole mountain came down. He's not trying to starve them out. He's been trying to save them. And in that moment, Cole was faced with a horrifying realization. The posse wasn't hunting a monster. They were a group of men blindly hammering on the trigger of a colossal, geological shotgun, with themselves standing right in front of the barrel. The Ghost Stallion was the only one who had been ringing the alarm bell, but everyone had mistaken it for a war cry. Before Cole could even begin to formulate a plan, a third, catastrophic boom ripped through the canyon, far louder than the others. This time, it was followed by a sickening, cracking sound that seemed to come from the sky itself. A massive fissure snaked its way down the face of the western ridge. The entire mountain groaned. The Ghost Stallion let out another terrified scream and bolted, not deeper into the canyon, but upwards, towards a high, seemingly impossible path. He knew it was happening. The time for warnings was over. The mountain was coming down, and the posse was directly in the path of the avalanche. There was no time to think, only to act. As the mountain groaned its final warning, Cole Younger was faced with a stark, all-in choice: ride to safety, or ride back into the heart of the unfolding disaster to save the very men who had scorned his advice. For a man like Cole, there was no choice at all. He swung himself into Redemption's saddle, his movements urgent but precise. He didn't have a plan. He only had an impossible goal: get to the posse before the avalanche did. Hiya! Red! We've gotta run! Redemption surged forward, his powerful legs eating up the rocky ground. But as they raced towards the western ridge, they saw the Ghost Stallion high above them, taking a parallel path along the treacherous upper cliffs. He was not fleeing randomly. He was heading in the same direction, a black streak of lightning against the crumbling rock. He knew where the men were. In that moment, the two rival kings, driven by a common, desperate purpose, formed an unspoken, impossible alliance. The scene was one of organized chaos. The Ghost Stallion, from his high vantage point, would let out sharp, piercing whinnies, his calls echoing through the canyon. It wasn't a cry of panic. It was a signal. He was guiding Cole, indicating the fastest, safest paths through the shifting rock below, paths only he, the true king of this canyon, could know. Cole, in turn, trusted the wild horse implicitly. He and Redemption followed the ghost's calls, navigating the treacherous terrain with a speed and confidence that bordered on supernatural. They were a team, a perfect fusion of wild instinct and human resolve, man and horse and phantom united in a single desperate race. They burst into a clearing just as the first wave of the rock slide began. The posse was there, trapped. Their own dynamite blasts had sealed their escape route, and they now stood frozen in terror, watching as the entire face of the mountain began to peel away. Jedediah Kane saw Cole and Redemption appear as if from nowhere, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. "Kane, this way. Follow the ghost. Now." Kane and his men, shaken from their stupor, saw the Ghost Stallion on a high ridge above them, frantically stomping and calling, indicating a narrow, hidden path they had never known existed. With no other choice, they abandoned their equipment and scrambled after him, their lives now depending on the very creature they had come to destroy. What followed was a desperate, heart-pounding flight for survival. Led by the Ghost Stallion from above and guided by Cole and Redemption on the ground, the miners scrambled up the hidden path. The world behind them dissolved into a deafening roar as thousands of tons of rock and earth cascaded down, obliterating the very spot where they had stood just moments before. They were running on a razor's edge between life and death. The final confrontation was not a battle between horses. It was a battle against gravity and time. They reached the safety of the canyon rim just as the last of the ridge collapsed into a boiling cloud of red dust. They stood there, gasping for breath, hearts pounding, watching the landscape of their home be violently and permanently rewritten. In the stunned silence that followed, Jedediah Kane looked from the devastation below to Cole Younger, and finally, to the Ghost Stallion. The wild horse stood on a nearby outcrop, his body trembling with adrenaline, but his eyes were clear. He looked at the men he had saved, a long, intelligent gaze. Then he turned and, with a final echoing call, disappeared into the wild heart of his newly reshaped kingdom. He had saved his home, and the men who had threatened it, all in one stroke. Kane, humbled and awestruck, walked over to Cole. He was no longer a proud foreman, but a man who had stared into the abyss and been pulled back. We were fools. We were trying to hunt a monster, but it was a guardian angel. The bounty, it's still yours. Keep your money, Kane. Just find a new place to dig. This canyon belongs to its king. The story of the Ghost Stallion who saved the posse spread like wildfire. The crude bounty poster was torn down from the saloon wall. The town didn't get its silver, but it got something far more valuable, a second chance and a lesson in humility. Cole Younger and Redemption rode out, leaving behind not a story of conquest, but a new legend. A legend of a wild king who spoke the language of the mountain and of the one man who was wise enough to listen. Their journey was far from over, for the West was full of stories waiting to be heard and ghosts waiting to be understood. The greatest legends are often misunderstood. If you are moved by the story of the Ghost Stallion, click the video on your screen now for the next chapter in the Legends of Redemption. Don't forget to subscribe and tell us in the comments. What other legends of the Old West should Cole investigate next?